As the months continue to pass us by, I am continuing to make my way throughout my house and renovating each space. I've made so much progress so far this year, and yet I am about to take on my biggest project yet. No task has been too big nor too intimidating, but instead more challenging, more rewarding, and more inspiring. So follow along as I take you through the makeover process of my laundry room.
Before we get started, I want to thank TREATLIFE for sponsoring today's video. TREATLIFE could not have come at a more perfect time of me remodeling this entire laundry room because they sent over their water leak detector that you probably guessed detects when there's been a water leak. What's great about this water leak detector is that it's low cost and effective. When water is detected, an alarm will sound off, but if you're not at home to hear the alarm, you can also receive in-app notifications straight to your home so you can make it back home to detect where the leak is coming from and prevent further damage or flooding. It does require AAA batteries to use, which come included, but the app will remind you when they're running low and need to be replaced. I chose to use one behind the washer and under the sink, but you could use them near toilets, water heaters, dishwashers, or even bathtubs. Water leak detectors are not the only products that TREATLIFE offers. They also have smart switches, smart plugs, smart lighting, smart sensors, and hubs, allowing you to make your home smart all at once with the capability of installing multiple smart devices and setting the scene linkage directly on the TREATLIFE app. Their hub supports a maximum of 128 devices, works with Alexa and Google Assistant. I also received their door sensor, which is another device that brings comfort, security, and peace of mind. Just like the water leak detector, it requires the hub to function, operates on a battery, and gives timely alert notifications directly to your smartphone app. TREATLIFE was kind enough to send over 2 gifts for 2 lucky winners. That'll include a hub and the water leak detector set. So to enter, all you have to do is like this video, share it with a friend, and comment. I will be choosing 2 lucky winners at the end of Saturday, December 31st. Be sure to check out TREATLIFE using the link down in the description. And thank you again to TREATLIFE for partnering with me. Now back to the video.
The first thing I needed to remove was the window and door trim. My house was built in the late 50s, and this is the original trim, so a lot of it was kind of difficult to remove. I needed to make room so I could start demolishing the broken sheetrock. My intentions were to only remove the back right corner that was already broken and the bottom portion under the window by the washer and dryer. That bottom sheetrock, there was nothing wrong with it, but it needed to come off mainly so we could redo the plumbing for the washer to drain. I know close to nothing when it comes to plumbing, so I left that for my husband to take care of. If it's one thing I've learned throughout all of my projects so far, it's to clean as you go to minimize the clutter and dust.
What if the wind could spread your love? What if your sweetness could reach everyone? There'd be no wars.
Oh yeah.
Whoops.
Okay, so it's been a couple of days since I tore down the sheetrock. Well, has it been? 1, 2. Yeah, so it's been a couple of days since I tore down the sheetrock. After I get this drywall up and the sides of the drywall up, I'm gonna move on to start building my cabinets, because I am gonna be building cabinets that go here. I'm not 100% sure about putting cabinets above the window. I thought about it, but I kind of feel like if I do, it might close in the space and make it feel a little bit smaller than it actually is. So I don't know. I'll kind of play around with that and think about that for now. But for now, I'm gonna be starting on that. And yeah, let's get to it, because it's fairly simple. I've done it before a couple of times, so I don't imagine that I'm going to have a hard time with it, but we'll see.
I measured and cut out the sheetrock I needed and then hung it with drywall screws.
Been 1 or 2 since I ran into you. Do you need a picture? Well, I get so it's hard to take one when your iPhone's full.
Okay, so it's about 6:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm trying to get as much as I can get done before my manager shows up on the site. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started and start taping and floating. We'll see how far we can get before that happens, and then we'll move along. This morning, you guys saw me apply the first of this tape and float process, and now I'm just lightly wet sanding before I apply my very first coat over this tape.
I ended up doing 3 coats using a bigger taping knife every coat, wet sanding in between with the large sponge. I cleaned up my mess once more and I was finally done with repairing the walls.
Okay, so once I was done repairing the wall, I began to build my upper cabinets. Now, my upper cabinets, I am going to be building frameless, just because for me, it's more cost efficient to not put any frames on them. 1x2s are pretty expensive still. These cabinets are still going to look really, really good. They're just not going to have that frame around them. I will usually rip down my plywood with my Craig rip cut, just because I feel like it's easier to do that than to try to maneuver a huge piece of plywood on my table saw. I do have a smaller table saw as opposed to like a big commercial one, so it's easier for me to do it that way, and then I rip my smaller cuts using my miter saw or my table saw that's needed. You can also take your bigger cuts to the big box stores and they will usually cut that for you if they're available or if their saw is in working condition. Sometimes I know it's under maintenance or sometimes it's not working, and sometimes that's not an option, but for the most part it usually is. I make sure to run all of my boards through the table saw with at least 3/4 of an inch in, so that I can put my back braces on the back as well, and that's what I'm going to use in order to attach it onto the wall. I am using 3/4 inch birch, and if you've seen me build cabinets before, this is like my 4th or 5th time that I've done this on my channel. I like to use pocket holes and pocket hole screws in order to connect all of my pieces. I also am using a 1/4 inch birch for the back panel. I am intending to put one set above the washer and one set above the dryer, or I guess if you look at it, one on each side of the window.
Since then, I finished building out the second upper cabinet carcass.
But at least they grow back while I'm on a one-way track. Now I know what it means to grow.
Alright, so it's time to start adding texture back onto the ceiling and this back wall. I'm not going to worry about that wall because I'm going to do a full tile wall. It'll make more sense once I actually do it, hopefully. So I bought a hopper gun. I've never done this before. This is going to be my very first time adding texture that's not a small repair patch, and usually when I've done a repair patch in the past, it's usually been with those spray texture cans, and those are pretty simple to use. I don't imagine that this is going to be hard. I bought it from Home Depot, by the way. It was like $80-something. I figured it'd be cheaper if I did it myself than to hire somebody to do it. It'd also be cheaper if I bought the gun versus renting it out. I think renting it out was like, oh man, this is heavy, $60-something for 4 hours. And I was like, well, what if this takes me longer than 4 hours? Then I'm gonna have to pay $100-something. I might as well just buy it. So I went ahead and bought it. I'm gonna get this set up. I'm gonna mix my joint compound and then we'll be ready to spray hopefully. Won't be that hard, right?
The time I got, it is just enough to get by. Yeah, it is just enough to get by.
Before applying the texture to the wall, I tested it out on some scrap MDF board I had. You could totally use some cardboard instead. I tried to spray as consistently as possible, and then I would go back and spray areas that seemed a little sparse. Overall, it wasn't hard at all, but holding the gun was quite tiring after some time, so just a heads up. I also feel like maybe I'll thin out the compound just a little bit more runny next time. I felt like it left the texture a little bit more raised than I would have liked, and I'm thinking it was because it might have been too thick. But not bad for my first time. I'm sure there will be a next. My manager and I took a quick trip to the hardware store to pick up some 1x3 select pine boards so I could start creating my doors for the cabinets. I measured and cut all of my rails and stiles, which would total to 8 of each. Y'all have seen me do this quite a few times before, so I'll quickly just go over it. I switched out my single blade for a stacked dado blade so I could create my grooves. I do like to test out the settings on a scrap board before running them all through.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic lights. And I really wanna know if I will ever figure out where the road goes.
After running all of my boards on one side, I adjusted the fence and created my tongues on the rails. To clean them up, I used some sandpaper to lightly sand them down.
Even if the sky is falling down.
I then measured and ripped down my 1/4 inch plywood for my middle boards. The last few times I built my cabinet doors, I've sanded them down after putting them together, but this time I decided to sand them down before. And I'm talking about the middle board here because I'm thinking I should have done it like this every time. It was so much easier.
Sometimes we're crashing down, but we get up and start from.
We're getting the roof replaced, and that's why there's so much noise in the background and all the banging and stuff that you hear. That's what that is. So I apologize in advance if you hear all of that over my talking. I'll try to make this quick, but I went ahead and textured. And as you can see, I don't know, I mean, I feel like I did an okay job. It's obviously my first time using a hopper gun, so I was not having any expectations of how good or how bad I was actually gonna do. I feel like I didn't do too bad. Definitely could have been better. Obviously, I'm gonna be painting the room at some point, and I'm most likely gonna be going lighter. I don't know. I really want to go lighter. Obviously, I have to prime, so mostly because a lot of it is new sheetrock. If I just put paint on there, it's just gonna soak up all of that paint. So I'd rather give it a good coat of primer and then go in with regular paint. If I'm in the mood for it, I'll spray all of the walls. If not, I'll just leave it as is and then we'll go from there. I don't know.
The ground. And around, I will keep on searching for my highs. You can say I lost my mind, I will keep on holding my head high.
Since I was already there, I decided to go ahead and add a coat of primer on the other walls after all, but I wasn't super concerned about it being even. As I waited on the walls to dry, I went outside to check on the roof progress and moved on to putting the doors together for the cabinets. Forgive me if it feels like I'm jumping around all over the place. I didn't want to wait around for things to dry and not move on to something else while I could. As most of you know, I only work on my projects when my little one is asleep, so I have to make the best of the time that I get.
When we wake, hear the birds and see the sun.
So while I waited on the doors to dry, the walls were already mostly dry. I moved on to adding new window trim. I did have to use my multi-tool to remove a small amount of the trim that surrounds the window so that I could insert the bottom ledge. I secured the trim with brad nails. And I repeated the same thing on the second window, but I made sure to put the top piece before measuring and cutting the sides, and that gave me a much more accurate miter when I joined them.
Before I sleep, hear the crickets, see the moon, side by side and through.
And once again, and not for the last time of course, I cleaned up some more.
I'm gonna go ahead and remove the rest of the baseboards that I never removed, just so they're out of the way, because the next thing to do is to remove this flooring, and I need those to come up in order to do that. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't have that many boards to take off. I'm gonna take off the door trim too. So there's only a few boards left. Shouldn't take me very long. When removing baseboards, if you don't wanna mess up your paint, or you don't wanna risk it peeling up, always score it with your knife before you go in.
Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright. You and I, we got it. We don't need no more. Even in the hard time, you and I can weather any storm.
Okay, so I rented this hammer drill from Home Depot, and I believe it's like $70 something for a whole day, and half of that if it's like for 4 hours. So I'm gonna try and get it done before 9 o'clock. It's like 7 o'clock now. but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get everything up and all of the mortar that gets stuck on there. But yeah, this is what it comes with. And then you have your attachment bit. I don't know what these are called. This is my second time doing this. And the first time I did it, it went super smooth. I did it in my restroom in this same space. It went pretty quickly. I was able to get it up and done within like, I think it was like 20 minutes or so. So I'm expecting this to go pretty easy and smooth, hopefully. We'll see how it goes, but I'm just gonna get this set up and ready and we'll start bringing up this tile.
I never felt tomorrow closing in this fast. Oh, I guess time's in a rush. Leaves are falling.
I started off with cleaning as I was going, but I quickly stopped and now I regret it because I have a pile of towel I have to clean up.
One-way track. Now I know what it means to grow old. Yeah, now I know the time I've got, it is just enough to get by. Yeah, it is just enough to get by.
We are done cleaning up the floors. Mortar that may have stayed behind, I need to make sure and pick up every single bit of that up because I've decided I'm going to be doing LVP in here. And in order for me to lay down LVP, the surface has to be completely smooth. One of the main reasons why I decided to do that instead of going with tile is time. Time, money, and workload. So it's gonna be a lot of work to re-tile this entire room. And I'm honestly not up for it. I know a lot of people were wondering, well, why didn't you just put new flooring on top of the old tile? I didn't want to do that mainly because if I did that, then my flooring was going to be that much thicker and higher than my other existing floors transitioning into the restroom and transitioning into the kitchen. I figured it'd be easier or better to just start completely fresh. The other thing I wanted to mention is we are ready to start painting the ceiling. Since the last time I talked to you guys, I haven't really done much except pick up all of the mortar off. I didn't do all of it. I was having to prep for a mini vacation that we recently took to Florida. So that's one of the main reasons why I didn't post last week. But in prepping for that mini vacation, I was running out of time to be able to do stuff in here. So I asked my husband if he could go ahead and remove the rest of the mortar since he had a little bit of free time. But anyway, he had some free time, so he was able to pick up the rest of that up. I started it, he finished it off for me. So that was great. This room feels so much more bigger now that it's primed. And I feel like adding a dark color again is really going to close in the space, and I want this to feel open and big and spacious. So that's what we're going for. So I've got some paint samples here. I'm just going to paint them on the wall, wait for those to dry, and then we'll go from there. I think if there's one thing I've learned about swatching paint colors is that you need to swatch a big enough sample size so that you can actually see the color. You'll have an easier time visualizing what that color would look like throughout the entire room. I don't think I like this one. We'll see.
It is just enough to get by. Yeah, it is just enough.
Here are my samples. I'm gonna wait for those to dry because obviously they dry different than they look when they're wet. While I wait on that to dry, I'm gonna get started on painting the ceiling, so that's fun.
While I waited on the ceiling to dry, I moved on to caulking all of my cabinet doors. I found that using this smaller tube was much more manageable than using a traditional tube and gun.
Sometimes I understand I'm making all the wrong demands in life. It never pays in the end. But still
Once dry, I sanded the rails and stiles and then filled in any small gaps.
I'm yearning to reach the shore. Now I know.
While waiting on the filler to dry, I decided to fill the pocket holes on the cabinets. I only did this to the bottom side since the top side will be facing the ceiling and will never be seen. I used pocket hole plugs and removed the excess with my multi-tool.
The time I got, it is just enough to get by. Oh, now I know what it means.
To cover the exposed raw edges of the plywood, and since I will keep them frameless, I added some iron-on edge banding for a more seamless look. I made sure to wrap it onto the bottom part where we filled the pocket holes, since you'll be able to see that as well.
It is just enough to get by. Yeah, it is just enough to get by.
Once the pocket hole plugs had some time to dry and set, I added some filler to help fill any leftover gaps and sanded it down once it was dry. These cabinets are pretty big, so in order to maximize the storage potential, I used a Craig jig to create shelf holes for shelves I will add later on.
Life is a winding road.
I went to my local Walmart and picked up one of these inexpensive clothing racks to use to hang my doors for painting.
Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic lights. And I really wanna
To hang the doors from the clothing rack, I attached these cup hooks to the tops of the doors. After drilling some small pilot holes, I just simply screwed them on.
where the road goes. Even if I'm falling down, I will keep on searching for my highs. You can
I used some plastic cloth hangers to hang them off of.
holding my head high, even if the sky is falling down.
Finally, it was time to prime. I am using Kills 2 water-based primer with my Flexio Wagner spray gun. I did 2 coats with a light sand in between.
Jumping from cliffs so high, trusting our wings to fly.
At this point, my gun was starting to act a little bit funny or weird and splattering my primer, being very inconsistent and just not spraying the way it should. I continued through, and by the time I got to the doors, it got a little bit better, but it still wasn't great.
Really wanna know if I
After spraying the second coat, I moved on to caulking the window before painting the walls.
even if I'm falling down, I will keep on searching for my highs.
I asked y'all over on Instagram which color from the samples I painted earlier you thought I chose, and if you chose the very last color on the right, then you were right. I felt it had the perfect green undertone to go with the cabinets. It was light enough to still make the room feel light and bright, but dark enough to withstand the abuse of a laundry room / mudroom. I am using the color Sculpture Clay by Behr, and it is in their scuff defense line. I've heard very good things about it being super scuff resistant, which will come in handy with my dogs. I did have to do 2 coats to get full coverage, and 1 gallon was just enough to get through all of the walls. Remember that the back wall with the cabinets will be full tile, otherwise I would have needed more paint. While the walls dried, I went ahead and drilled my holes for my hinges on the doors and lightly sanded them to prep them for paint.
All the good times just begun. We know what we have, let's hold hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. You and I, the future is bright.
Okay, so we are going to attempt, or I'm going to attempt, to spray my doors and my cabinets in the garage. It's been raining the past couple of days. After priming them, that was the last day that we had any sunshine, and I'm hoping I can cover most of this area, and that should be sufficient enough for me to be able to spray in here. I don't see anything that I'm concerned about getting overspray on. If I do, I don't think it'll be a big deal. Hopefully not. But yeah, let's get to work. I asked you guys over on Instagram which was your favorite color. I think I also asked you on here kind of to help me decide and make the final decision on what color to go with. I was very surprised that most of you guys actually picked the lightest color on that roll of swatches, which was, I don't know, it was kind of surprising to me because I thought maybe you guys would like more of like the darker greens. That seems to be very popular right now. But I personally really like the last two colors. The lightest one and the one right next to it. I ended up swatching them on the wall in the laundry room. So I ended up deciding on going with y'all's favorite, which was the super light one, which again was not my very first choice. It was my second best choice, but I ended up deciding on that one because that one actually looked a lot darker in the room than it did outside of the room. So I'm going to be using this emerald urethane trim enamel paint. This is the same type that I used for my built-ins that I built in the living room. I really liked the way it sprayed. I really liked the formula. It worked really well. This is a color matched by Sherwin-Williams, but the color is actually muted sage from Bear. So that's enough chit chat. Let's go ahead and start painting all of this.
Sleep, hear the crickets, see the moon, side by side and through and through. No limit to what we can do.
As you can see, I'm still having trouble with my gun spraying inconsistently, but I still sprayed a single coat on everything, including the doors. You can see how I'm using the clothing rack for the doors. If my doors had been standard size and not so long, I could have left all of them on there instead of having to switch them out since they couldn't go in the middle space because of how long they were. We're done.
I guess we'll catch up with you guys in the morning for round 2. Bye.
Good morning. I'm ready to start on the second coat. I obviously have to lightly sand everything and then go in with the second coat. I'm not going to show you the entire process just because I feel like it's really repetitive. If you've been on my channel, you've seen me paint a lot of things over the past year, including furniture and cabinetry more recently, and it's the exact same process every single time. Products are different sometimes and the results are different sometimes because of, you know, different design choices or whatever, but the process is the same. So I'm gonna start and then I'll catch up with you guys once everything is completely done and we're ready to start hanging these things. I just showered like maybe an hour ago, so I don't want to, and I washed my hair.
I don't want to get overspray on my hair. So, who likes my new cap? Anyways, we still have a dilemma. The sprayer was still acting a little bit funny, so I decided to take out my Home Right sprayer. I don't prefer this because the finish isn't as fine as my Flexio sprayer, but it's good enough. For some reason, my Flexio is just not spraying the way it normally does. I've never had this issue before. I just need to do one last pass on everything, super thin coat, just to make sure everything's even and I don't have any splotchiness in the finish, because right now on the doors there is a few spots where you can see where it's a little bit heavier on some spots versus others, and I don't want that, obviously. And I'll catch up with you guys once I'm done with it, because I don't see the point in showing you me spraying for like the millionth time. So I'll catch up with you guys when I'm ready to go ahead and hang them on the wall. I needed to mark my studs on the wall of where I will be hanging the cabinets. So I used my stud finder, and then with some tape, I marked off on the ceiling where I will be able to see past the cabinets. Also, I'm gonna mark on here. I'm gonna use my sticks here as a spacer for a 1/4 inch. And then remove those. Give myself another 1/4 inch. And I should have my cabinet lined up with this line here.
The world had more of your smile. What if the wind could spread your love? What if your sweetness could reach everyone? There'd be no wars. Maybe the birds will.
Okay, I want to make this 100% clear that this is probably a 2-person job. They do sell some things that you can put under your cabinet so that it can hold it up for you. I obviously don't have one. I didn't have time to go buy one either, so I'm using a mop. Again, not recommended. I would not recommend for you guys to do this. I am doing it at my own risk, obviously. I am aware of the risks, so please don't come for me in the comments, please. I appreciate it. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and put this one up there, and then we're ready for the doors. I'm so excited, you guys. You have no idea. This is finally starting to like come together, and I think that you guys, more importantly, are gonna start to see things come together rather quickly after this, and really see the room come to life. I have the vision in my mind, obviously in my head, and I can totally see the end result, but I know that you guys really can't, because you're not in my head, you don't understand what I'm thinking. I think this is gonna really help solidify what look I'm going for, and it's gonna help you kind of grasp what I'm trying to go for. But anyways, enough of that. I'm gonna go ahead and hang this one up.
About your heart. Maybe the trees will whisper the word. Maybe the sun will spread your joy to the ones who lost their hope.
The last thing left to do was to attach the doors. Before I could, I had to remove the hooks from the top and add my hinges. I'm not worried about the small holes left behind from the hooks, since they will never be seen, since they will be on the very top, but you could, if you wanted to, fill them in.
You fill my head with roses. I can't help but dream away. Standing on the field with you and flowers everywhere.
Now let's remember how this room looked just 2 weeks ago, and how far we've come since.
Blue dew, blue moon, kinda mysterious, shaded with someone I'm not really into. Do you need to fix it? Talking bullshit.
This laundry room. We have this main wooden door here on this side that leads to the back porch.
My plan is to sand it down and restain it. And then I also have another door. I don't know if you guys remember, a while back I redid my second restroom and I never added a door to it. Well, now it's finally time to go ahead and add a door for some added privacy. In true Glenda fashion, I decided to go ahead and build my own door instead of buying it, but you could definitely buy one instead of making your own. I actually had some leftover barn wood that we weren't using and that we weren't really sure what we were going to use it for. So I decided to take some of those 2x6 boards and cut those down, ran them through the planer, got them nice and smooth in order to use them.
Before painting the door, I went in with some caulk and caulked all of the seams of where the 2x6 met the 1/4-inch plywood I had added for the panels. On the opposite side where I placed the 1/4-inch plywood, I mitered and added some decorative trim to hide the groove I had created with my router, which is where the 1/4-inch plywood sat in. I will have a more in-detail tutorial on how I built this door on a separate video. I caulked all of the edges of the decorative trim, and while I waited on that to dry, I flipped the door over and began priming the opposite side. I am applying Kiehl's original formula with a foam roller and dipping straight into the gallon, which I do not suggest, by the way. I'm only doing this because there's not much left in the gallon and I will be disposing of it after this project. While I waited on the primer to dry, I moved on to the main door. I started by removing the old finish. The old finish was so bad, it was super flaky, lots of scratches, so I decided it would be easiest to remove by scraping it off. After what seemed like forever, I had finally removed the old finish. I sanded everything smooth, first with 120 followed by 220 grit.
We are ready to start staining this beautiful door. I'm going to be using a water-based stain. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I absolutely love special walnut stains. It's my favorite stain of all time, but I recently discovered this water-based stain by Bayer. It's really good. It works really well. It doesn't smell awful. Just super easy cleanup. The color that I recently discovered is called Rustic Brown. I think that it'll complement the cabinets really well. But yeah, let's go ahead and do this. Since that didn't go as planned, as you can see, it's very splotchy. I'm going to precondition the door and then do an oil-based stain instead, because that's clearly not working. So I'm pretty bummed out.
While I waited on the second coat of stain to dry, I moved back to working on the barn door because it was clearly still not staining right. I lightly sanded it before applying 2 generous coats of Bayer Scuff Defense paint in the color Clove in an eggshell finish. It is a very deep, rich brown, almost black color. I used a good brush to get the paint all over and then went over it with a foam roller to remove any brush strokes.
I'm not really sure why, but this is not picking up stain like I would like it to. I decided I'm going to use gel stain instead. So I went in and picked up a couple of different colors, aged oak and chestnut. I'm going to open these up and see which one I like better, and then we'll go from there. So hopefully this works out because I don't want to spend too many more days on doors. I want to move forward to something else. So let's see what these look like.
And for some reason, the gel stain was still not sitting evenly on the door either. I wasn't sure if maybe adding another coat would help to decrease the apparent blotchiness, but I wasn't sure I wanted to waste any more time on it.
We're gonna move on to something really fun. I got this package in today. We picked it up on the way out of the gym earlier this morning, and it's a brand new sink. I'm excited to share with you guys what this sink looks like. It's a farmhouse apron style sink. So not anything fancy, not something you haven't seen before. Ooh, that's really nice. Wow, it's a lot bigger than I thought. So this is a 27 incher, and I'm glad I went with a 27 incher because it's a pretty decent size. My original idea was to go with a very vintage antique sink, but after spending weeks on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, OfferUp, and all these other websites trying to find an antique or vintage sink that wasn't like a fortune, it just wasn't happening. My second option was to go with a farmhouse sink just because I love the look of a farmhouse sink. I have one in my kitchen and it looks really, really well, and I thought that it would complement this laundry room really well. So I'm excited. I think it looks really, really good.
With the farmhouse sink delivered and unpacked, it was time to start building out the base cabinet for it. Since I already have a farmhouse style sink in my kitchen, I went to look at the structure of the base cabinet to see how I would build mine. It turned out that the main difference from a regular base cabinet and a farmhouse sink base cabinet was that there was added support on the sides of where the sink should drop into and enough space behind it for the faucet. So after figuring out some measurements for the cabinet to fit the sink, I ripped down 3/4 inch plywood for the pieces I needed, along with 2 of the back support beams to screw the cabinet into the wall. So I ended up with 2 back supports, 2 side panels, and 1 bottom panel. I created pocket holes on either end of the back support boards and the bottom panel. Then I made a 3x4 cutout on one corner of each side panel for the toe kick space using my jigsaw. I then attached the bottom panel to the sides using wood glue and 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. I also attached another scrap board the same height as the toe kick to the front to cover the empty space. I attached the back supports the same way as well.
Leaves are falling down, but at least they grow back while I'm on a one-way track.
I then moved on to lightly sanding all of the nail holes I had filled on the door before going in with primer and sanding it once more before painting it just like I did the opposite side.
sometimes I understand I'm making all the wrong demands in life. It never pays in the end, but still I am here, moving on like before. I'm yearning to reach the shore. Now I know.
Finally, it was time to add the support to the base cabinet to support the sink. From what I gathered from the one in my kitchen, I had to have my kitchen sink flush with the top of the cabinet, or very close to. So I measured 8.5 inches down, so that's how deep my sink is, and marked it in the front and towards the middle back. I made sure the two marks were leveled and marked a line. I cut a 2x2 board and created pocket holes on each end to be able to connect it to the front of the cabinet. I did leave my cabinet frameless, but you could add a frame if you wanted to. I left it frameless because my upper cabinets are frameless cabinets. I doubled up a couple of scrap 2x2 boards to use as the supports on the sides. While I waited on the glue to dry, I added edge banding to the rest of the exposed plywood front and removed any excess.
When we wake, hear the birds and see the sun. Side by side our fears are done. Oh, the good times just begun.
I secured them on the sides with glue and screws, making sure to line them up with the lines I previously drew.
We have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right.
I added a few more 2x2s for extra support, although I don't think it's necessary given my sink has been in place for going on 5 years now without an issue, but just me in my head, I felt like I needed to add it. Now all I had to do was double check and make sure it fit well before securing everything.
Even in the hard times, you and I can weather any storm. Before I sleep, here we go, side by side and through. No limit to what we can do.
So let's see what these added details have done to the space. Before I could tile the back wall, I figured I'd get some of the smaller things out of the way, like painting the sink base cabinet to match the top ones. Not sure if you remember, but I had mentioned my original idea was to have the bottom base stained as opposed to painting it, but the more I thought about it, I felt like painting it would look best, since I will be adding more wood tones throughout the room, including the flooring, so I felt like it would be a better balance of the two. Because my cabinet is a frameless cabinet, I did have to add a few small pieces to the front to hide the gap on each end of the sink and the cabinet wall. I also managed to cut and build the doors that will be installed at a later time. Early on, when I built the upper cabinets, I also cut and edge banded some shelves to go on them, so I went ahead and placed those inside. With those smaller things out of the way, I went ahead and prepped the walls for the tile. Only the painted walls. I lightly sanded using 80 grit sandpaper. Because I didn't have a laser to help me get straight lines, I drew out my starting point following the window trim. I wanted this to be my starting point because I needed a full tile to run in between the window and the upper cabinets on each end. I chose to do this wall before installing my floors, so I don't already have any baseboards installed either. To make sure I started on the right height off of the floor, I added a sample size of the flooring I will be using, plus a 1x4 board for my baseboard, plus 2 stir sticks, which would equal to 1/4 inch, just to give me an extra space. I started from the bottom and worked my way up, and it was a very repetitive process. I worked in smaller sections because I wasn't sure at what point my manager, aka my 2-year-old, for those of you who haven't met her, would show up, or aka wake up from her nap. If I had done all of it at once, I would have spread my thin set in a bit of a larger area. Not too large, but larger than what I was working in.
You look at me like I'm crazy when I shut my feelings out. You look at me like I'm different. Still you stay cause you feel something real. Get so lost in my moments. Doesn't mean I don't need you. I fell in love with your color.
There's mosquitoes everywhere. So as you guys saw, I've already started to go ahead and add the tile to this back wall. One box is actually covered quite a bit of space, and it's actually covered a little bit more than I thought it was going to initially, so I'm pretty happy about that. This is going to be more of a time lapse for you with me explaining a little bit here and there. I am using the mortar that comes already pre-mixed, and the reason I chose to use that instead of mixing it myself is simply because of the convenience. This entire tub was like $14 or $15, which isn't bad at all. I went back and forth with the idea of using the dang, I forgot what it's called, but it's an adhesive, kind of like a sticker. I ended up deciding not to because this is a pretty expensive project. And like I said, that entire tub cost me $15. So I was like, it's kind of like a no-brainer as far as like saving money to just use this instead of the other one that I'm talking about. There was a subscriber that mentioned it to me, and I have been thinking about it. But don't worry, it is something that I want to review and use it, but it's just gonna have to wait for a later project that's a little bit smaller than this one, where I don't have to use as much of it. I believe it's like $30 something, and it only covers like 30, no, maybe even less. I think it only covers like 15 square feet. It seems like a good product. People who've used it before don't seem to complain about it, and it's less messy, obviously. It's obviously faster because you don't have to wait for it to dry. You could just the same day you can grout. So it does save you a bunch of time. But like I said, the main reason why I'm not trying it out is just cost.
They kind of tell me what I'm thinking. I fell in love with the way we are and the way we lose it. There's something different about us. And the reason why we stay, we fly around like paper planes. They never know where we will fall. Nobody can see us, still they wanna tell.
I didn't have a whole lot of cuts to do, or at least it didn't seem that way, but for the most part I used a super inexpensive manual tile cutter. I believe it was like under $30. I had purchased this whenever I did my bathroom floor tiles, so I already had it in my garage. I also back buttered each tile, which I don't believe is necessary for smaller tile like this, but I figured I'd do it anyway.
Cup after cup. Yeah, it's just the way we do it.
Once the left side was almost completely done, with the exception of the smaller cuts I needed to make, I moved the washer out of the way and begun that side the exact same way. This side felt like it was much faster than the other side, maybe because I felt more confident and I had found my rhythm.
Sharing stories that we never had, yeah, none is real. I think we're searching for reasons not to be like them. We fly around like paper planes. They never know where we will fall. Nobody can see us, still they wanna tear us apart. There's something different about the way we are. this hard. Yeah, wanna feel your arms around me. I need you more, need you here, more than I would like to admit. Let's forget about tomorrow. Yeah, should I hide away forever?
I made sure to mark where my door trim would be placed so I could stop the tile up to that point.
Call you mine, think about you every time. I remember that it's over. Yeah, you never break, you never lie, you never ever scared of the dark. So why am I the one who cries? I'm so afraid to be left behind. I think about you a lot. It's almost like I can't stop. Can't stop. Yeah, yeah. You never lose an argument. So I've been trying hard.
I left all of the more difficult and smaller cuts for the wet tile saw, which I picked up from a garage sale actually, that my neighbor had told me about a few months back. So I've had it in my garage, I've just never used it. So this was my very first time using it. I paid, I think it was $20 or $30, I can't remember.
I always knew that this would happen. Yeah, you would find a new distraction. I need you more, need you here, more than I would like to admit. Can we let go of tomorrow?
I'm not gonna lie, towards the end, it really felt like I was never gonna finish. Like, it's like, oh my God, I'm kind of over it at this point. So I'm just removing all of my spacers. I'm fine if some of them fall, obviously, but I'm not trying to make a huge mess so that I can start grouting. I did wait an additional day because I don't know, it's been really, really wet outside, super humid. It's been raining for like 3 weeks nonstop, really. I'm not even exaggerating. It's really been raining for like 3 weeks. I wanted to make sure that this was like really set before I went ahead and grouted. So now we're ready to grout. As soon as I get all of this off, I went ahead and mixed my grout already, so I'm just gonna take a little bit and just, oops, make a mess, clearly. I just mixed it with water until I got this consistency, and now I'm just literally just placing it. I'm gonna work in sections because I don't want it to dry on me before I get a chance to clean it up. It's a little bit darker than I was hoping, but it looks good. I was hoping it was gonna be a little bit more white, but whatever.
Yeah, you never break, you never lie, you never ever scared of the dark. So why am I the one who cries? I'm so afraid to be left behind. I think about you a lot.
Okay, it's been about 20 minutes since I started. I wanted to do it in a small section. By the time I was done, it was already like 10 minutes since I started. And then I'd wait an extra 10 minutes and then start cleaning it just to see if that was like a good amount that I could take on before moving on to the next section. And yeah, I think that's gonna work out perfectly, actually. Oh, falling over.
It's almost like I can't stop, can't stop. Yeah, yeah. You never lose an argument, so I've been trying hard to pretend that I'm okay. It's just a phase, and everything is going just great. I think about you a lot. It's almost like I can't stop.
I continued the same process of working in smaller sections and then 20 to 30 minutes later going in with a damp sponge and removing any excess grout. 30 minutes after that, I went back and wiped it down again to remove any haziness.
But I went ahead and primed them, gave them 2 coats of primer, sanded in between each coat, and then of course gave them the same green color that our upper cabinets are, 2 coats with a light sand in between, just like any other painting job that I ever do. Once I was done with the painting process, I went ahead and installed my concealed soft close hinges, and as you can tell by the name, they softly close so they don't slam onto the cabinet. After I installed the hinges, I went ahead and installed the actual doors to the cabinet. You may or may not have noticed that I actually installed a separate base to this base cabinet. When I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for my countertop, I actually ran into the issue that I realized I wasn't going to be able to use the existing plumbing for the actual sink. It was sitting way too high compared to the sink. I actually built this cabinet to be the standard height, which I completely forgot that when we had the utility sink, I don't know if you remember, we had a utility sink here in the laundry room. Or when we installed that a few years back, we actually had the exact same issue. I'm not sure why, but I guess these cabinets in this room, because remember, this entire wall was cabinets, were actually sat higher than your standard cabinet height. And so naturally the plumbing also sat a little bit higher. And so since the height wasn't enough, adding a separate base onto the bottom of that actually really helped. I built that base just based off of 2x4s and reinforcing it together, making sure it was squared with just some screws and some wood glue. My intentions, hopefully, are to disguise that separate base from this cabinet by bringing my baseboards all the way around towards the front and towards the sides to kind of conceal that look. This wall was clearly empty. I didn't have this here, but let me explain. I was on Facebook Marketplace and I ran across this 6 locker unit and I was like, this could probably work. They had it listed for $110 with free delivery and it was on there for a week. I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait another few days and if it's still on there, I'll offer them $80 and then I'll go pick it up myself because it wasn't too far for me, and then I'll bring it and then I'll basically refinish it. I offered them $80, they accepted it, picked it up, and I brought it home. I gave it a really good cleaning, ended up priming it with 2 coats, light sand in between as always, and painted it the exact same color as my cabinets because I wanted that color to come this side of the room as well to kind of help balance it out. It gave it 2 coats of the paint with a light sand in between. For the primer, I did use the Ben Shellac primer because it does adhere to metal and slick surfaces better than any other primer I've ever used. You'll notice I didn't prime or paint the sides, the top, or the bottom legs. And that's because I'm going to actually be building around this to make it look like it's built into the additional cabinets that I'm gonna build. I'm going to be building cabinets that go right over top that meet up to this wall, but I'm going to be adding plywood to the sides, putting baseboards towards the bottom, so I'll bring the baseboards all along there.
Before I could lay out my new floor, I had to do a bit more of prep work. Having a smooth leveled subfloor is super important. There was still grout all around the perimeter of the room, so I had to go and remove it all. I used a floor chisel and a hammer to tap and remove it. There was still some raised mortar left behind on the floor and I used a floor scraper to remove it. I then spent the next 2 hours chiseling away any mortar left behind. Before I finished the prep work, I measured my space to determine the layout of the flooring. I'll explain more on how to do it in a bit. There was a few pieces of hardy board I wanted to remove and replace, so I unscrewed them, measured, and cut the necessary size with just a knife and a spare 1x3 as a guide. Cutting hardy is sort of like cutting sheetrock. I secured it to the subfloor with screws. They'll just slide it. Oops. Simple as get the product out of the dang box. I think I'm too excited. There we go. Because they sure don't make it easy. When laying vinyl planks, it's important to remember to begin on the left corner of the room and work per row before moving on to the next one. You also want to keep in mind that your planks should run along the longest wall of your room. When measuring your space to determine your layout, divide the width of the room by the width of the boards to see how many planks it'll take. If one side is left with a small plank, split the difference so that both ends look more similar. For the length of the room, divide the length of the room by the length of the planks and determine how many planks it'll take. Sort of the same as the width. It's suggested that if it's less than 8 inches on one end, to split the difference just like you did with the width. It's recommended to stagger your joints at the beginning of your second row and alternating after that, meaning the first plank on the second row should be shorter than your first. Starting from the left side of the length of the room really does make a big difference because you're able to just lay your next plank right into the locking mechanism. If you start on the wrong side, you'll end up working backwards and having to slide the next plank under the previous plank, making it super difficult. I know this because I did this. I didn't realize I started on the wrong left side, and I hope that makes sense. So I had to remove what I have started and start on the correct end. It's recommended to close the distance by tapping on the edge of the plank on the longer side before tapping the shorter side into place. If you do not tap and remove that small gap, your flooring will not be waterproof. I mostly used a utility knife to cut my planks by scoring and then snapping along the score line. I used my jigsaw for the cuts that went around objects and that were a bit more complicated. Overall, the entire room took me about 10 cases and about 5 hours to complete. I picked up a couple of these transition pieces, cut them to fit the doorway, and installed them. Instructions say you can glue or nail them, but I chose to nail them. I then moved on to installing all new baseboards and door trim. I used prime pine for this, 1x4s for the baseboards, and 1x3s for the door trim. I made sure to bevel each baseboard at a 45-degree angle where they met each other. To cover the gap, of the flooring to the locker unit built-ins, I used some small 2-inch trim. I'm not a huge fan of quarter round, so I used this instead for a more modern, sleek look, but you could definitely use quarter round wherever you need to cover any gaps.
So it's probably hard to see, but when I put this trim here, I cut this a little too short so you can see the gap still a little bit. So what I'm gonna do, and here I'll show you up close. See how when I nail it, it's gonna push it in so you can see that gap. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add just a small little shim, so that way when it's pushed back, you can't see it. See, it still lines up here, so it should be good. And now when it pushes in, when I nail it, you won't see the gap. Okay, so I finally decided I'm gonna go ahead and paint this door to solve the dilemma. I think adding black is really, or it's not black, it's like a really, really deep, rich brown that almost looks black. I think it's gonna add the perfect contrast to all of the light colors that are going on. Obviously the trim isn't painted yet. That's something that we're going to take care of next week. The majority of you guys decided or agreed that it would look better if it was painted the same color as this door that's over here. I temporarily removed it because I need to add spacers to the top, because since I added the trim to the to the door frame, it hits the door frame and then it also is rubbing on the bottom of the trim or the baseboards. So anyways, I've decided I'm going to use that same color over on this door. I'm going to go ahead and paint this, give it 2 good coats, and that should be good enough. It's in the Scuff Defense line by Behr. It's really, really good paint. It's really scratch resistant. I'm really surprised at how well it works without having like a top coat or anything. So I might even think that this might make a really good furniture paint. So I think I might start using this specific line for that. I don't know, maybe, we'll see.
Remember, this is what the floor used to look like, and here's the results of the vinyl plank flooring installed. This week we are finishing the baseboards and trim by caulking all of them. I am using a paintable 20-minute caulk. Before I could paint everything, I had to add wood filler to all of the nail holes.
instead of sanding, what I like to do is I like to take just a damp rag and just go over it that way. Make sure it's just damp, not like completely wet, because if it's wet, it will remove way more than what you want. But this way, it's kind of like wet sanding really. This way you don't make a mess, and you also get rid of what you need to get rid of. This is a painter's rag, by the way. Ta-da!
I painted 2 coats of the semi-gloss on all of the trim and baseboards. To paint the doors, I used both a brush followed by a foam roller to get a smooth finish and no brush marks. I taped off and primed the windows using Kiehl's original oil-based formula. These windows will eventually be replaced, and they are the last on the priority list compared to other windows in the house, so painting them white will give me the look I will eventually have.
Okay, so not sure if you guys remember or not, but I never actually finished off these cabinets on the very top. I want to cover the gap that I left. I'm going to do it basically the same way I did the top of my other cabinet here across. I'm just going to measure, let's see, 11 3/4.
I used 2-inch lattice trim and secured it with brad nails.
I picked up this countertop from Home Depot. It was $69 or $68, something like that. I'm gonna be cutting it and trimming it to fit my sink here. And this one comes with a backsplash. Home Depot didn't sell the ones where it's just like a straight board without the backsplash. I don't think I want the backsplash just because it takes up so much space from here. So I think I'm gonna try to remove it after I cut it down to size, just to make sure that I actually don't want it and before I mess up this countertop. I don't want to mess it up and then not have anything to work with. I was just putting it here just to see if I like the way it looks. And I think once everything is caulked and painted and done, it'll look really good. Just nice and clean. Remember, this sink is pretty big, and it's not a big countertop space that I need. It's literally just the edge and over behind the sink where the faucet is gonna go. I would prefer less gray in this marble coloring, maybe a little bit more warmth in it, but I think it'll work. I think it'll be okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and take some measurements. As of now, the sink is not installed. It's just been sitting in here the whole time. So I'll have to remove that, install it, and then hopefully we can get our faucet installed as well. Let's get to work.
I transferred over the width of the countertop and placed tape so that it would help not blister when I cut it. I flipped it over and then marked exactly where I would be cutting. I then took measurements of the actual sink and transferred those over and marked them the same exact way so I could cut out the opening. I did go back and place the countertop in place after every cut to make sure it was still fitting properly. In order for me to remove the backsplash, I had to remove that small lip on the top so that the countertop would sit flat on my table saw. I don't think this is as safe as it could be, so I don't know that I would 100% recommend it. Like mentioned before, my Home Depot didn't carry the straight boards without the backsplash attached, otherwise I would have used one of those instead. After reading over the installation instructions on the faucet, I marked where to make all 3 holes. I centered it to the sink drain. I didn't realize it stayed stuck in here, so gotta get those out before I can do the next one. I bought the matching edging you can just iron on to cover all the exposed particle board. To install the sink, I used silicone on all of the points of contact for the sink before putting it in place. I double checked the countertop fit before securing it the same way using silicone. I added a couple of 45-pound plates to help weigh it down until the silicone was set. I finally got my hardware in, and I'm actually using the same hardware that I used on my kitchen island. I really like the quality of that hardware. It's really, really nice. It's on the pricier side for only 5 of them. I think it was like $25 or something like that. I'm just gonna go ahead and install these. Like I said, they come in a pack of 5. I hate when companies do that because, like, who really needs only 5 of them, right? Like, it's an odd number, and usually you need an even number in order to complete your set, but whatever. They look just like this. They're super nice. I think they're really nice. I used silicone caulk to seal the edge of the sink to avoid any water seeping through. I actually decided to add the backsplash back, but I trimmed it down a little bit smaller. I clamped it down and let it sit overnight before coming back the next morning and removing the clamps. Next, I worked on caulking and sealing all of my edges before adding the end caps to the countertop to finish it off.
Okay, so I was working on building these clothing racks and I have a complete separate short video for you guys. It is super simple. I try to make it as DIY friendly as possible, mostly focusing on just screws, wood glue, nothing fancy, minimal power tools, that sort of thing. I also received my shoe storage. It came in a couple of days ago finally, so I'm gonna go ahead and build it. And then once I have it built, then we are going to make it over. I added a decorative trim all around the edge and 1-inch scrap pieces of 1/4-inch plywood to the fronts of the drawers before painting them black. Okay, now that I've finished my little clothing racks, it's time to hang them. And I need to mark where my studs are. I'm gonna go grab my stud finder. I'll be right back. I'm just trying to get a feel for how long this drying rack is. I know it's obviously 24 inches, but I need a visual so I can mark on the wall and see where my placement of them is actually going to be. It's obviously not straight. I'm just trying to see what it would look like at that height. I think that height actually looks pretty good. Move my feet. To hang the second one, I made sure to use a level and have them both at the same height. ahead and caulk all of the remaining areas that need caulking, paint the remainder of the spaces that need painting, and then we'll finally be able to decorate. So I'm gonna speed this up for you because nobody wants to watch me caulk for like hours. This is literally gonna take hours.
I added new light fixtures and then came back to paint all of the trim once the caulk was dry.
I picked up a bunch of awesome vases and florals and picture frames from different thrift stores and also Hobby Lobby. I'm going to show you what I've got. I'm going to go through and pick whatever I think is going to look best in here. And then I'm probably going to end up painting some of the vases that I've thrifted because the colors just don't match, and I think it'll look really good once they're painted to kind of flow a little bit better with this area.
After cleaning this small vase, I began scuff sanding it to prepare it for paint, but then realized the paint came off, so I sanded it off and wiped it clean and left it as is. For this larger vase, I cleaned it and added some chalk paint. Once the paint was completely dry, I added this stone spray paint on the top and then added the brown texture spray paint on the bottom. Before I could bring my shoe cabinet inside, I painted the remaining baseboard. I added the same matching hardware from the locker unit built-ins. I added an accordion style coat hanger to this wall for when we come in through the garage.
I ordered these cute little curtains off of Amazon, and I know they're short, but hear me out. They're supposed to be cafe curtains. Supposed to be halfway through your window, not reach all the way to the top. And I thought that was like the cutest little detail to add here to this window because it seemed a little bit plain. I'm gonna add some artwork, but I thought this would be a nice little touch. So I picked up two different rods. I wasn't really sure which one I liked better. There's a black one and then there's a white one. And looking at it now, I think the black one stands out a lot better. So I think we're gonna go with the black one.
I found some really nice printable vintage art on Etsy and had those images printed. I used the old frames I had thrifted a couple of weeks back. A few last minute touches and I was completely done. Here is one last reminder of what this laundry room used to look like. And what it looks like now. It's been an amazing 2 months of hard work, learning, and getting to share the entire process with y'all. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I can't thank y'all enough for choosing to stick around and continue to show your support. I love y'all, be kind, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye.